Okay, we're going to continue with the review packets that we started last class time. And the next question on page 4 is for simplifying your functions and make sure you write all the answer with positive exponents. So the first one, we have 3y to the 4 divided by 18y squared. We need to simplify the answer. The number part will simplify with the number, the y with y, right? So both 3 and 18 can be divided by 3, so this is 3 times 1 and 3 times 6, right? So on the number part, we are going to have 1 on top and 6 at the bottom, right? And a lot of time if it's 1, we don't really write that part. And for the y part, this is basically same base dividing, so you can think of this as subtracting the exponents, or you can think of it as reducing. If you subtract, you will end up with y to the second power. If you reduce, you get rid of 2 here and 2 on top, so you will end up with 2 on top. So personally, I prefer reducing. It's easier to see for me. So this means I end up with y squared on top, which you can also write that as y squared divided by 6, right? So that would be your answer. Hopefully that makes sense. The second one, you have to be careful. One of the common mistake is people will try to reduce this 2 with this 4 and get rid of this y squared. That would not be a legal step because on top you have 2 terms, at the bottom you have 1 term, which means the denominator, that 1 term, is shared by both of these 2 terms on top. So one of the things you can do is you can break that into 2 fractions. And they are going to share the denominator. So first one would be the first term on top divided by the denominator, subtracting the second term on top divided by the 2xy squared, the denominator, right? So when we get to these points, we can reduce it. So if you look at the first fractions, the number part, there's nothing you can reduce. So 5 on top, 2 at the bottom, right? Both of them have x, so if I get rid of 1x at the bottom, 1x on top, that will turn into what? 2 here. So this become x squared. And on the bottom, we have y squared. So that's the first term, and then we carry over the subtraction sides. Looking at the second fractions, the 2 number, both of them can be divided by 2. So it's 2 times 1, 2 times 2, right? So you end up with 2 on top. And both top and bottom has y, right? So the x you just carry over, and y squared, if you get rid of y squared and y squared, then you don't have any more y, right? So that would be your answer. Are we okay? So break them into 2 fractions and then you reduce. So that would be number 2. So looking at number 3, again, the common mistake would be students try to just cancel part of it, but we cannot do it like that because there's add and subtract in between the top and bottom. So think about they're married, so you cannot just get rid of part of it. Your strategies for this would be you will try to factor the top part and factor the bottom part. If they are separated, you may be able to reduce some part of it, okay? So if we are looking at factoring, hopefully the top part will look like something we have done last class time. This one is the difference of 2 what? The difference of 2 square. And then if we can rewrite this as some perfect square minus some perfect square, this would be x squared, and then 64 is going to be 8 times 8 squared, right? So this means a plus b times a minus b, like the first term plus the second term, the first term minus the second term, right? For the difference of 2 squared, plus and minus. So the first term here, after you rewritten it as like perfect square, is x, right? So x plus 8, and then the x minus the 8 would be the difference of 2 square here. At the bottom, it's not difference of 2 square, but the first rule of factoring tells us to pull out the GCF, and both of them have what kind of factor? So both of them can be divided by 2, so we can pull a 2 out. Can we pull the x out? We cannot, because x is not a common factor, right? So only 2 can be pulled out as a factor. After we pull out 2, we still have an x here, and then bring the negative. 16 divided by 2 is going to be 8. So after we factor the top and bottom, now we look at it one more time, and then we can see this x minus 8 separated and look exactly the same, right? So this is the common factor. We can cancel it. So the final answer is going to be x plus 8 divided by 2. So for me, this answer is acceptable. Sometime on my lab, they may want you to go a little bit further. So if they want you to simplify some more, then what you will do is going to be just like what you did on the last questions. The 2 terms on top share the 2 as denominator, so you can break that into 2 fractions. The first one will be what? You will have your x over 2, and then you will have plus 8 over 2, right? And 8 over 2 can be reduced as 2 times 1, 2 times 4, right? So the final answer would be x over 2 plus 4 over 1. When you have 1 as denominator, it just means this is a whole number, right? So that would be your final answer. Hope you're okay with that. If you run into some issues or you don't understand, feel free to contact me, email me. I'd be happy to help, okay? So number 4, when you divide fraction, first you need to do what? Change your division to multiplication. And then after you change to multiplication, you also need to flip the second term. So meaning this guy go to the top, this guy go to the bottom. The first term remain the same, right? So division turn into multiplications, and then flip the second term. So basically, anything on top can be reduced with anything at the bottom. So let's see. If we're looking at the second fraction, both of these 2 numbers can be divided by 5. So I can reduce that by 5, 5 times 2, and 5 times 3, right? I think that's all. There's nothing we can reduce top and bottom like here. So let's multiply them together. After we reduce top and bottom, basically we just multiply straight across, right? So we are going to have 5 multiplied to a 2, and then x to the 4 times x to the 3rd power, right? At the bottom, we're going to have 3 times 3, and then we have y and y squared, right? So if we multiply the number together, on top, we're going to have 5 times 2 is 10. At the bottom, will be 3 times 3 is 9. And then you have same base multiplying, you add the exponents, right? So you have 4 and 3 more. Together, you have x to the 7. At the bottom, again, same base multiplying. So 1 and 2 more, and you add them together, you have 3, right? So that would be your final answer. Are we okay? Next, we are looking at number 5. Number 5 is adding and subtracting fractions. So when you add and subtract fraction, you're going to need what? We're going to need them to have the same denominator. So I'm going to need a lowest common denominator, and that need to cover both x plus 1 and x minus 2. So basically, we just need to multiply the 2 together, right? So in order for the first fraction to get to x plus 1, x minus 2, basically, we need to multiply that with x minus 2, right? And whatever you multiply at the bottom, do the same on top. And then for the second one, x minus 2, if you compare these two, you're going to need to multiply a x plus 1, and whatever you multiply at the bottom, again, you need to multiply to the top, right? So it's kind of like when you reduce it, it's kind of like multiplying a 1, so it's not changing the value, right? So now, after that, what we will have is the same denominator, which is x plus 1, x minus 2, the order doesn't matter, right, when you multiply. And on the top, the first term have 3 times x minus 2, and be careful, after that we have minus 4 times x plus 1. And we have to multiply that out first. And if you like, you can pause the video and try that, and then when you're ready, you can turn on the video and double check your answer, right? So this is x plus 1, x minus 2 at the bottom. On top, after I distribute, I have 3x minus 6. And then be careful with the last two terms because we are multiplying a negative in there, right? So if you multiply a negative in there, so that would be negative 4x, and negative 4 times 1 would be minus 4, right? And then now we can try to combine like term on top, and the denominator will stay the same, right? So the denominator would be x plus 1 times x minus 2. On top, we have 3x minus a 4x, which will give us a negative 1x, right? And then a negative 6 minus a 4 would be a negative 10. So you could pull out a negative on top, but it's not going to need to reduce anything because it doesn't have these two type of factors, so that can be considered as your final answer. So when you add and subtract fraction, make sure you have the same denominator. The next one is multiplication. So basically you have a term times the fractions, right? One of the strategies students seems to like, okay, is to write both of them look like a fractions. So the first one doesn't have a denominator, which means it has a invisible what at the bottom? 1. And then the next one, 1 here, if you're multiplying that on the side, it means it can go to the top, okay? It belongs to the numerator on the top. And then at the bottom, we have 4, right? So when you multiply your fractions, anything on top can be reduced with anything at the bottom. Sometimes my students like to multiply them straight across first before you reduce, but either way is correct. So on top, we have 2 and 4, right? So those 2 can be reduced as 2 times 1, 2 times 2, right? And I think that's all we have that can be reduced. So now we have x cubed on top and x squared at the bottom is kind of like 1 times 2, right? So it's just 2. But on top we have same base multiplying. We need to add the exponents. So it's kind of like you have 3 here and 2 more. All together we are going to have x to the 5th power. And at the bottom, just 1 times 2, so it's going to be 2. So you can write that like that, which is the same as if you put the x on the side. So sometimes people will say this is 1/2 x to the 5th. Okay, they mean the same thing. All right. Hopefully you're okay. The next one, we see there is a negative exponent, right? And the question say all the answer need to be positive. So in order to change a negative exponent to be a positive exponent, we can move it to 1 over, put it in the denominator, or if it's in the denominator, you can flip it to the other side and write that as positive, right? But the rest of them will be on top of a fraction. Just be very careful. Sometimes students get it confused with the negative number and negative exponents. So this negative 3 stay where it is because it's not a negative exponent. So if I write that as a fraction, then my negative exponents need to go to the other side to turn into positive, but the rest of them will stay on top. So on top, we have a negative 3x squared. We also have 12. So we will multiply them together. So to multiply them together, negative 3 times 12 is negative 36, and then we have x squared. At the bottom, we have x to the 5th power, right? So anything else I can reduce? It looks like both of them have x, and this is multiplying together, so we can reduce it. If I get rid of 2 here and get rid of 2 here, then the bottom part will end up with 3 of the x's, right? So the final answer is going to be negative 36 over x to the 3rd power, okay? So again, if you have questions, feel free to contact me, and I would be happy to help. All right, so the next one, there are a lot going on, right? But I did spot this is a negative exponent, so I have to move that. And then we have x squared and 3 of them, right? Also, do you remember what is the answer when you raise something to a 0 power? Something raised to 0 power is going to turn into just 1. And then my 10 is at the bottom. I have to be careful because this is 2x raised to negative 2, but there's no parenthesis around here, so the negative exponents only belong to the x. So 2 is going to stay here, but your x to the 2nd power will go to the bottom. And this one is power over power, meaning I need to multiply, right? So if you don't remember, I'm going to just write a little note for you. X squared to the 3rd power means you have 3 of those, right? So x squared times x squared times x squared, right? You have 3 of those, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Totally you have 6. That's why this is x is 2 times 3 equal to x to the 6th power, right? So this is one of the rule that you're supposed to practice. If you're not so sure, you can write that out, okay? So this x squared to the 3rd power is going to give me x to the 6th power. So this is basically just multiplying the exponent part, right? All right, so now what? On top, we are going to have 1 times 2, which will give me just 2. At the bottom, we have 10. And then now we have same base multiplying, like 2 and 6 more, right? So we need to add the exponents. After we add the exponents, 2 plus 6 is going to give me 8. Anything else I can do? Yes, we can reduce the number, right? Both of these numbers can be reduced by 2. So it's 2 times 1, 2 times 5, right? So the final answer would be 1 on top. So if you get rid of everything, you need to use the 1 to hold the place, okay? At the bottom, we have 5 times x to the 8th power. Are we okay? All right.